A very brief word before we start the show. We've got a survey for listeners of Catalyst and Open Circuit, and we would be so grateful if you could take a few moments to fill it out. As our audience continues to expand, it's an opportunity to understand how and why you listen to our shows, and it helps us continue bringing relevant content on the tech and markets you care about in clean energy. If you fill it out, you'll get a chance to win a $100 gift card from Amazon, and you can find it at latitudemedia.com/survey, or just click the survey link in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Latitude Media, covering the new frontiers of the energy transition.
I'm Shayle Kann, and this is Catalyst.
It was quite dramatic that the Secretary of Energy, Secretary Wright, wrote this letter to FERC saying, here's a rulemaking I'm putting before you on access to the grid. It strongly proves the point. The whole AI industry needs the grid, and that this current administration is willing to do anything and everything to support AI. So now we need to see the next step of, okay, well, let's expand the grid.
Coming up, transmission.
Clean energy is under attack, and it's more important than ever to understand why projects fail and how to get them back on track. The center-left think tank Third Way surveyed over 200 clean energy professionals to answer that exact question. Their newest study identifies the top non-cost barriers to getting projects over the finish line, from permitting challenges to NIMBYism. To read Third Way's full report and to learn more about their PACE initiative, visit thirdway.org/PACE or click the link in the show notes. The AI boom is here, but the grid wasn't built for it. Bloom Energy is helping the AI industry take charge. Bloom Energy delivers affordable, always-on, ultra-reliable on-site power. That's why chipmakers, hyperscalers, and data center leaders are already using Bloom to power their operations with electricity that scales from megawatts to gigawatts. This isn't yesterday's fuel cell. This is on-site power built to deliver at AI speed. To learn more about how fuel cells are powering the AI era, visit bloomenergy.com or click the link in the show notes.
Surging electricity demand is testing the limits of the grid, but Energy Hub is helping utilities stay ahead. Energy Hub's platform transforms millions of connected devices, like thermostats, EVs, batteries, and more, into flexible energy resources. That means more reliability, lower costs, and cleaner power without new infrastructure. Energy Hub partners with over 120 utilities nationwide to build virtual power plants that scale. Learn how the industry's leading flexibility provider is shaping the future of the grid. Visit energyhub.com.
I'm Shayle Kann. I lead the early stage venture capital strategy at Energy Impact Partners. Welcome. Apologies for my singing voice. We're talking transmission this week because I had Rob Gremlich on a little over a year ago, to talk about the woeful state of U.S. transmission build-out, which has truly been embarrassing for the past decade or so, and even worse in recent years. And we talked about all the reasons why that was true and what might change and so on. But, I'd say the outlook was we're in a tough spot, and a bunch of things need to change in order for us to start building significant transmission lines again. And just as a reminder, we need to build new transmission lines for lots of reasons. We need to integrate lots more renewables on the grid and other generation. And also now we need to serve all of this new load that's showing up in the form of data centers. So the need is doubled. And that speaks to why I wanted to have the conversation again today, which is a lot has changed in the past year in the electricity sector. Things in other parts of the market have changed substantially. And transmission may or may not be the hardest thing to change. So I wanted to see whether all of the rapid change, all of the money that is flowing into the sector has moved the needle on building out new high voltage power lines in the US. So I brought back Rob Gremlich from Grid Strategies to do an update. Here's Rob. Rob, welcome back.
Thanks, Shayle. Good to be with you.
All right. So you and I talked on this podcast a little over a year ago about transmission and new transmission, I would say in particular, in the US. And it was a tale of woes and a big long exclamation of how amazing it is that we've been able to build so little transmission, new high voltage transmission in particular in the United States in the past decade or so. And I wanted to have you back on because, the past year has changed many things about the electricity sector. And I wonder whether it has changed this thing. So my high level question for you is, do you think we're in a fundamentally different position with regard to, I don't know, your outlook on new transmission build in the US relative to a year ago, or is it more the same place?
Well, we're still struggling to put the pieces together. I think we do have a good platform that actually has a pretty decent shot of, surviving the political change we've all experienced because transmission is so critical for data centers and AI-driven data center demand. But we don't really know that for sure yet. Things are just sort of getting settled with the relevant agencies here in Washington, Department of Energy and FERC. So we don't really know how that's going to turn out. We did actually have an uptick in new lines in 2024. So that was new because I think when we spoke, we were talking about how there were only 55 miles of new high voltage transmission lines in 2023, which is down, a trickle from the 4,000, that had been built 10 years prior, which hopefully I wasn't all woe is me, woe is us when we spoke.
I was woe is us, certainly.
I mean, I do like to point at that experience 10 years ago and say, hey, look, we were able in this country with all the permitting challenges we have to build 4,000 miles of new high voltage transmission. I connected all this clean energy. So there is hope. And we like to point to that example of saying, look, when we get the pieces together, right, we can do this. But then, some things happened and we went down to a trickle of only 55 miles. Well, there was an uptick to like 880-ish miles in 2024. So that's, some good news. When I first saw that, I thought, oh, great. Like we're starting to turn things around. But if you look a little bit closer, you kind of see, oh, wait a minute. These were lines that were like begun 10 or 15 years ago that just finally got finished. Now, you could say, all right, that's a good story because a number of these did need like federal permits from federal agencies. And I think during the Biden administration, they were approving transmission projects. And so, that's good news. And, that could continue, might not continue in the current administration. We don't know yet. But there was an uptick. So in some ways, we've gotten some permitting. But some of the key policies, like at FERC in Order 1920, it could, be sort of branded as a Democratic thing. I think it was bipartisan and, it actually had no preferences for renewable energy or anything like that. So I think it should be safe and robust to a, partisan change with new commissioners coming in. But we don't know yet. We don't know what the new commissioners are going to do about 1920. Are they going to implement it or just, kind of render it, sort of a dead letter and a weak order?
Can you briefly re-describe 1920?
Sure. So that was the order issued a few years ago for proactive long-term transmission planning, 20-year plans for each region. So it applies to the grid operators like PJM and MISO and SPP and California ISO, but also to the non-RTO utilities. They need to get with their neighbors and put regional plans together. And so, significant order, very well crafted in my opinion. Chairman Glick and his team, shepherded it through, and Commissioner Clements and others, Chairman, and then Commissioner Christie was there for the latter part of it. He made some changes. But it kind of wound up very sort of bipartisan and, technology neutral, which is fine. But it's there. It should be done. The courts will have their say. Hopefully people will revoke their challenges from the courts and just let it stay as it is. And then hopefully FERC will actually, implement it with teeth and not just accept any old thing that comes in on compliance. But that is the next step, is the regions file their compliance approaches with FERC, and FERC, kind of on the margin can either make it be a weak rule or remain a strong rule.
I mean, is this the fundamental reason why so like in other parts of the electricity world, things have changed a lot in the past year, right? And it's driven by just it's like necessity is the mother of invention. It's a combination of necessity is the mother of invention, and there is essentially an endless pool of money willing to throw itself at any solution that gets more power to data centers faster. Is the reason why transmission hasn't benefited from that like the only way to solve it is it's like what you're describing. It's like a FERC order that has to go through the ISOs that takes years to go through the process. And so it's just inherently a slower thing, because you could imagine a scenario where sort of similar to what we're seeing in other categories, right? Like hyperscaler wants to build data center and strikes a deal with utility where they can get interconnected faster if they pay for 100 miles of new 765 kV line or something like that. Like, you'd think that kind of thing would be happening.
Yeah, I think it's just, it's not right in the bullseye of, the data center's immediate need or the utility's immediate need. It's sort of the background infrastructure that everybody relies on. And absolutely, you need to build up that network, that backbone network to support all this new load. But it's not the obvious thing. It's not what, incoming officials at the Department of Energy immediately go to as, here's immediately what we need to go focus on. And it's not, it doesn't catch a lot of the press attention. A lot of the press attention is about, look at this, on-site generation option, or a new, now we're doing rice, generators, or this or that or the other on-site option. Those get, for some reason, more attention. But I mean, my understanding from the hyperscalers and the data center developers is that they all really, really want the full network transmission service with all of the good, backup and cushion that network provides to their operations, and the 5 nines reliability that you only get that way. And so I think the message is starting to filter through the process. I mean, it was quite dramatic that the Secretary of Energy, Secretary Wright, wrote this letter to FERC saying, here's a rulemaking I'm putting before you on access to the grid.
Right, but it doesn't really have anything about transmission in it, right?
Well, it's access to transmission. And then, so it begs the next question of, well, if you care that much to do this dramatic order that's, almost never used authority, and take all the beating from state regulators who would be losing some jurisdiction, if you're willing to do that, well, then you must care about the size of the grid, the actual capacity of the grid. What's access to a grid if it has no capacity for you? So, to me, it strongly proves the point that the whole, AI industry, if you want to call it that, needs the grid, and that this current administration, which is willing to do anything and everything to support AI being done in this country, it proves that the transmission network is critical to that, because they're taking this major action to get access to the transmission grid. So now we need to see the next step of, okay, well, let's expand the grid and all the things that come with that, which is Order 1920, and then inter-regional transmission, and then using the DOE programs like the Transmission Facilitation Program. We could go on, but there are a lot of things that FERC and DOE can do to actually enable the expansion of the grid.
Is this a little bit of a tragedy of the commons kind of a problem?
100%.
It's where it's like any given data center company needs transmission expansion,
right,
but you can't attribute that transmission build out to that specific data center necessarily. And so they can't say, I will put down money for you to build out new transmission lines specifically for me. And as a result, it gets pushed down the order of priority list, because they're like, okay, immediate concern is getting this data center connected to the grid. And so instead, I'm just going to go buy a bunch of gas generators or whatever it is.
Exactly right. Look, these hyperscalers, and you and I know them all, and I'm sure we both have many friends at each of them. they are in intense competition with each other, to the point where the people I know at the hyperscaler, they don't actually know which data centers are being developed for their company because it's so commercially sensitive that only a few people, even in the company, know which ones they're really planning to go forward with. And so if they're in that intense competition, like company to company, then it's of much less interest, just much less incentive for them to go work on the network that all of their competitors get to use just as much as they do. So that's classic public good, tragedy of the commons. And, it's the reason why, in this scenario, this is a classic reason why you have government leadership. And, as a nation, if we are in an AI race with China, then we should be using federal leadership to build out the network for all of those data centers here that want to be in this country and operating here, not the Middle East or, Asia or wherever else. And so, for this to happen right, you really need federal leadership. States and regions can do a lot as well, and localities, but, we really need to build out the transmission network, which is an interstate, federally regulated network.
Do you ever wonder why it takes so long to get clean energy projects up and running? Do you have permitting reform on the brain? Are you NEPA reform curious? The new PACE study from Third Way pinpoints the non-cost barriers that stand in the way of clean energy deployment and keep new solar and transmission projects in limbo. They surveyed more than 200 industry professionals to understand what's slowing down deployment and offer practical solutions on how to fix it. To read Third Way's full report and to learn more about the PACE initiative, visit thirdway.org/PACE. You heard the phrase speed to power a lot lately, but here's what it really means. AI data centers are being told that it will take years to get grid power. They can't afford to wait, so they're turning to on-site power solutions like Bloom Energy. Bloom can deliver clean, ultra-reliable, affordable power that's always on in as little as 90 days. Bloom's fuel cells offer data centers other important advantages. They adapt to volatile AI workloads, they have an ultra-low emissions profile that usually allows for faster and simpler permitting, and they're cost-effective too. That's why leaders from across the industry trust Bloom to power their data centers. Ready to power your AI future? Visit bloomenergy.com to learn more.
The grid wasn't built for what's coming next. Electricity demand is surging from data centers to EVs, and utilities, they need reliable, affordable solutions that don't require building expensive new infrastructure. Energy Hub helps by turning everyday devices like smart thermostats, EVs, home batteries, and more into virtual power plants. These flexible energy resources respond in near real time to grid needs, balancing supply and demand. Plus, they can be deployed in under a year and at 40 to 60% lower cost than traditional infrastructure. That means more reliability, lower costs, cleaner energy. You can't get much better than that. And that is why over 120 utilities across North America trust Energy Hub to manage more than 1.8 million devices. Learn more at energyhub.com or click the link in the show notes.
Let me throw a couple of recent announcements at you and just get your take on how big a deal is this and what does it mean? Okay, so one was, I think just recently, SPP, Southwest Power Pool, got, I think, approval to build this 765 kV transmission backbone, as they called it. That sounds quite positive. How big a deal is that?
Yeah, that plan, the ITP plan, is huge. They went back and forth, and I don't know the final number in terms of it might be closer to the 10 billion version rather than the $20 billion version.
Yeah, it's like 8.6 or something was the number I read.
Okay, so it got unfortunately cut back. I hope there's a way. Here's another way. Like the federal government could come in and say, hey, for AI race with China, we want to get you back up to the 20 billion, and we're going to help you. But hopefully, it ain't over till it's over on that. But at any rate, directionally, it's fantastic. A 765 kV collector loop with, anybody's favorite generation source is available in that, Great Plains footprint, and, the market will decide which ones go forward. But there certainly could be a tremendous amount of clean energy that connects to that system and powers a tremendous amount of data center and new manufacturing and other load in that area.
Okay, so now an announcement that that points in the opposite direction, which is that the DOE, the Loan Programs Office, canceled the loan guarantee that was going to be offered to the Greenbelt Express project. So to your point, it seems from all the other indications that this administration would be super in favor of new transmission build out. That cancellation seems like an odd decision in light of that. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so many people interpreted that as, oh, maybe they don't care about transmission. I don't interpret it that way. I think that was a very unique circumstance where a senator decided to use his minutes in the Oval Office to talk about a specific loan to a specific transmission line. Okay, that's not going to happen very often in our, in the future. And if it does, anytime a senator uses his time with the president to talk about a specific loan to a specific line, that project, that loan anyway, will be in trouble. The project, I expect will go forward. It's a great project. But that loan is no longer. So I just think, presidents do things at the request of senators sometimes. And, that's what happened.
How many, okay, I guess the way to ask this question is, you said before, like, okay, to the extent that we built anything out recently, it's been stuff that was in the works for the past 10 years, et cetera. So presumably we should have pretty good visibility then into how much we will build for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. How much is it?
Yeah, I think it's looking pretty good. I mean, you've got 765 kV AC plans. We mentioned SPP, but MISO in the Great Lakes part of the Midwest, and is looking at 765 PJM as well. And they just came out with a new, much more ambitious plan than we've seen from them in the Mid-Atlantic. And ERCOT in Texas also has 765 kV plans. So that's 4 regions who are, for the first time in many decades, doing the highest AC voltage transmission lines that we have. So, those take time, but those are now being planned. And there were also plans that, started more like 5-7 years ago, the MISO long-range transmission plan. Some of these are still facing some challenges, like that one there's a challenge at FERC with some states. But hopefully that will go forward. California ISO has continued. They've been cranking along quietly for many years. Pretty much they're the only ones who have kind of gone nonstop on transmission. So every year they're doing more, and it's bringing in, resources from around the West. So I do think there's a lot of indications. New York has some. There's a new line that the NECEC from Quebec into New England is finally going forward after, some back and forth and tough court decisions and opposition. But I do think there are a bunch that are on their way and looking promising.
So the curve may bend back up a little bit, at least. Like, that stuff comes together. We could be building hundreds, thousands of miles per year.
Yeah, we could be getting into the few thousand or more miles per year.
And then how much is all this stuff tied up in the question of permitting reform? How much does that matter? Because it's not clear to me whether that's actually on the horizon. It may be, but it certainly hasn't happened yet. Do we need it?
I do think we need it. I mean, you can build things here and there under the current regime, which again, was proven by 10 years ago. We did it, but there are real limitations with that, and some of it is this big interregional opportunity. Like, we don't really have a system in place to build interregional transmission from region to region, MISO to SPP or SPP to the interior west or interior west to the coast. All of these neighboring regions, there's a massive untapped value of transmission there. And, we don't have a regional transmission organization with a planning process to deal with that. And this whole looking at the whole industry on a more macro scale, we're evolving out of a industry that started with 3,000 utilities doing their local thing in their local fiefdom without much of a tie between them. And so we're grafting onto the top this more regional and then interregional approach. And it's a process, a multi-decadal process that we're still working through, and we're nowhere near the end game on that. So we're still working through on that. Permitting reform, at least as set up in the Manchin-Barrasso Energy Permitting Reform Act, EPRA, from a couple years ago. It has a transmission title that has a big focus on interregional transmission planning and kind of determining what are the list of benefits that are the basis for cost allocation and some federal permitting role in there. So those things, in my opinion, are extremely helpful. It's a great bill. It was bipartisan, passed the Senate Energy Committee 11-4. Only one Republican opposed. Same one, Senator Hawley, who opposed the Grain Belt loan. But otherwise, very strong showing at the Senate Energy Committee. And now it's, I think it's teed up for the broader permitting package, which there are complexities on the other components of the package that both House and Senate are working through. I expect to see the House moving pretty quickly on one piece, the NEPA-related piece, and that'll be an important milestone. So I do think there's a chance, and I do think it would have a very big impact on transmission and enabling transmission going forward.
How much innovation do you see in the transmission world in the sense of either planning, right? Like people have talked about siting transmission lines along railways, that kind of thing, undergrounding, technology innovation. What do you think is interesting?
Yeah, I do think there are some very interesting, I'll call them advanced transmission technologies. One category is high performance conductors with carbon core or superconductors, where you put up a new wire either on the same tower or rebuild the towers.
That's for reconductoring more than new build, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's for both, but it does open up the opportunity for reconductoring, which is very fast because you don't need a new right-of-way for that. So that's one category. Another category is grid-enhancing technologies, which are more the operational type technologies, topology optimization, advanced power flow control, dynamic line rating, that sort of thing. And storage as transmission you could put in there. So, and those increase headroom and capacity in a quick way. And again, the mantra in Washington anyway is speed to power, because that's kind of the mantra for the data center community right now. And those things are speedy. They're relatively inexpensive and they're speedy. They don't fully solve the problem. It's not like you don't need new transmission as well. But they do increase the headroom, and we all need headroom because it's a very constrained, congested grid right now.
So final question, I guess. You mentioned we don't really have a system for interregional transmission. There are those out there, folks like Grid United, run by Mike Skelly, famous longtime transmission developer, Invenergy, and others who have planned projects that are interregional. So how are they doing it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there is a little market for some transmission that you can cobble together enough, basically money from customers, like voluntary subscriptions from utilities along the route or at either end in order to pay for some lines. Long term, I don't think that's enough to build anywhere near the optimal amount. But there is some, and these developers, to their credit, are looking at like some super high value pathways, and they have, I think in many cases, very cleverly figured out good routes that, can be put together and worked things out with landowners. So many of them are pretty far along on that. And what they do, I mean, they kind of pass the hat to utilities and say, hey, would you pay this much? And if they get enough, then they can go forward. And, they do often need federal permits, and one hopes that there are actual staff at the Department of Interior and places like that to actually issue permits. It does rely on that in many cases. But some of these lines are, looking very, very promising. So I do think we will get some of those under the current regime, even if we don't get permitting reform. But if we get permitting reform, and or significant FERC action in the interregional space, I think we would get a lot more.
All right, Rob, thanks for the update on the lines. We'll be back in another year and see if things have changed substantially from now.
All right, we'll be ready for it. Good to talk to you, Shayle.
Rob Gremlich is the founder and president of Grid Strategies. This show is a production of Latitude Media. You can head over to latitudemedia.com for links to today's topics. Latitude is supported by Prelude Ventures. This episode was produced by Daniel Woldorff. Mixing and theme song by Sean Marquand. Stephen Lacey is our executive editor. I'm Shayle Kann, and this is Catalyst.